that Magic was retiring because of HIV.
Toughest thing I ever had to deal with other than when my parents died. It was tough. It was a sad, sad day.
Do you remember where you were?
Yeah, I know exactly where I'm at.
Where were you? What went through you?
I was just getting ready to take my nap, and I got a call from Lon Rosen, which handled a lot of Magic stuff at the time, and told me the news. And I had a game that night. It was tough.
And your first conversation between the two of you was?
I called him later on that day.
What was that like?
This day forward, the trophies that are going to be awarded to the MVPs of the Eastern and Western Conference Finals, in the East, it'll be called the Larry Bird Trophy, and in the West, that will get the Magic Johnson Trophy.
Wow.
For 40 years, we've told the same story. Magic and Bird saved the NBA. They built the bridge that Michael Jordan walked across. They're the foundation everything else is built on. But Larry Bird just said something that changes everything. He didn't just defend his legacy, he challenged Magic's. And in the process, he brought up a name that nobody expected, LeBron James. This isn't a nostalgia trip. This is a declaration of war between the men who built basketball and the man who redefined it.
Years ago. And now we played in front of probably 15, 16,000. Now the Final Four, 72,000 people saw the game. It's really incredible.
Well, I don't know if 70-some thousand can see it, but they're here. Probably watching on Jumbotron, but you know, it's amazing how the game has come so far and all the time they put into it to make it better. So the NCAA has done a great job, and it's just getting bigger and bigger. When we first came in, there's 32 teams. Now there's 64, and a lot of quality teams out there.
Do you now, in your heart, believe you're the better player?
Actually, I've always said that
Larry Bird doesn't do interviews anymore. Not really. He shows up at Pacers games sometimes, he gives a nod to the camera, he disappears back into the life he's earned. So when he sat down for a rare, extended conversation about the state of basketball, everyone paid attention. The setting was a small studio in Indiana, low-key, no bright lights, just Bird, a reporter he trusted, and decades of silence waiting to be broken. They started with the usual stuff, the 1979 National Championship game, the battles with Magic, the 3 championships. But then the reporter asked a question that shifted something in Bird's eyes. Do you ever feel like your era gets reduced to just one story, just you and Magic saving the league, end of discussion? Bird leaned forward, his jaw tightened, and when he spoke, his voice carried the same competitive fire that once made him tell opponents exactly where he was about to shoot from. You know what bothers me? Not the credit we get. We earned that. It's the credit other people don't get. Doc Erving, Moses Malone, they were doing it before us. They were carrying the league when nobody was watching, and now they're footnotes. He paused, letting that sink in. And you know what else bothers me? The way people talk about the next generation like they're just standing on our shoulders, like they didn't build anything themselves. The reporter asked if he was talking about LeBron James. Bird's eyes narrowed. I'm talking about anybody who's great. LeBron's been carrying this league for 23 years. That's not standing on shoulders. That's building your own mountain. Bird just did something nobody expected. He defended the new generation while questioning how the old one gets remembered. But the real target of his words wasn't LeBron. It was the man standing next to him in every highlight reel. Subscribe to see what happened next.
Hundley, let's go to Hot Rod and Magic.
13 World Championships at Boston Gardens. Your first trip in here. Are you nervous?
No, I'm not nervous. I'm very excited about the big crowd and about being here in Boston for my first time.
How about your injury? You all right?
Well, not really. My injury has come down to my running ability and effectiveness to make a quick move to the basket, because that's my best offensive move, and I can't do it that well.
This is Bird country, and these fans may be on you today.
Well, I know they will.
The problem with our people is that we come late to the party a lot of times. We come late to the financial party. We're great at everything, but the last thing we got to dominate is money. So we got to continue to look at that.
Here's the thing about Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. They've spent 40 years being mentioned in the same sentence. The 1979 championship game, the 80s rivalry, the dream team. They're a package deal, two sides of the same coin, the yin and yang of basketball's resurrection. But Bird's words suggested something simmering beneath that narrative. People act like we walked in and the league was dead and we brought it back to life, Bird continued. That's not how it happened. The ABA merger in '76, that's what saved the league. Doc and Moses, those guys brought the talent. They brought the style. Me and Magic, we just brought the TV ratings. He wasn't wrong. In the new book, Moses and the Doctor, author Luke Eplin makes exactly that argument, that Julius Erving and Moses Malone deserve far more credit for the NBA's survival than they've ever received. The ABA infusion of talent in 1976, not the Bird-Magic rivalry in 1979, was the real turning point. I'm not saying we didn't matter, Bird added. We mattered. But there's a difference between being the face of something and being the foundation. Magic understands that. At least, I think he does. That last line hung in the air. I think he does. Not, I know he does. Not, he'd be the first to tell you. I think he does. For anyone who understands the dynamics between these two legends, that was a shot. A subtle one, a respectful one, but a shot nonetheless. Magic's great at telling the story. He always has been. That smile, that energy, he can sell anything, including the story of how he and I saved basketball. But stories leave things out sometimes. Not on purpose, just the way stories work. Bird wasn't attacking Magic, he was questioning the narrative, and in doing so, he was opening a door that's been closed for 4 decades. Bird questioned the story, but Magic has spent his whole life telling it. How does the greatest salesman in basketball history respond when someone suggests his product isn't quite accurate? The next chapter reveals Magic's reaction.
And all I asked was I wanted to be traded. And then all the other things came out. I said this, I said that. But I really didn't say anything, but I would like to be traded. And after a week or after 2 days, I looked up, I said, I demand to be traded, or West has to go, something like that, or this or that. And it was never that.
Well, you took some heat for that, though, didn't you?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, because you came into the league, everybody's favorite, especially in L.A., and then it looked like you had ousted the coach, but that it didn't happen that way.
I don't think it'd be in danger at all because LeBron's legacy is secure. We're talking about a guy in year 19 and 20, and there haven't only been a handful of players have ever played that long, and most of those guys were kind of role players, just serviceable players at that point in their career. LeBron James arguably might have had one of his greatest seasons, and we know he's had some great seasons.
Magic Johnson doesn't miss opportunities. He's a businessman. He's a brand. He spent 40 years building an empire on that smile, that energy, that ability to make everyone feel like they're part of something special. So when word of Bird's comments reached him, he didn't get defensive. He got strategic. At an InvestFest event in Miami, surrounded by entrepreneurs and fans, Magic was asked about Bird's interview. He didn't flinch. Larry's my brother. He's always been my brother. We went through something together that nobody else will ever understand. 2 kids from nowhere, carrying the weight of 2 cities, 2 franchises, an entire league. You don't go through that without forming a bond. The crowd applauded. Magic smiled. But then he kept talking. And you know what? He's right. Doc and Moses deserve more credit than they get. I've said that for years. The ABA guys, they paved the way. But here's the thing about paving the way. Somebody still has to walk down it. Somebody still has to make people care. He leaned into the microphone, that familiar twinkle in his eye. Larry and I made people care. We made the NBA matter to people who didn't know a jump shot from a free throw. We took what Doc and Moses built and we put it on national television. That's not disrespect. That's building on a foundation. Then Magic shifted. He brought up LeBron without being asked. And Larry mentioned LeBron. Good, he should. LeBron took what we built and built something else on top of it. That's how it works. Each generation adds a floor. Doc and Moses built the first one. Me and Larry built the next. Michael added another. LeBron's been adding for 23 years. He paused, letting the weight of that sink in. The building's still standing, That's what matters. Magic did what Magic does. He turned a potential feud into a lesson. He acknowledged Bird's point while reinforcing his own. But the basketball world wasn't done talking. The next chapter reveals how Doc J and Moses Malone's legacies became the center of this unexpected debate.
He's very Virginia. People always say, well, this young man, about 6'10", would never make it. But I was 6'10" with a lot of heart. And I took a lot of pride and determination to be the best. You know, I can remember the time that me and a friend used to go to the playground. We never partied.
They were hanging on by a thread, and Dr. J was the reason both of them survived. Because in the ABA, Dr. J was the end-all be-all. He was the guy. He kept that league alive. And then when they merged,
while Bird and Magic dominated headlines, a quieter but no less significant conversation was happening in bookstores and documentary screenings across the country. Luke Eplin's Moses and the Doctor was released last week, and it's forcing a reckoning with NBA history that's long overdue. The book, which frames the Sixers' 1982-83 championship run as a turning point in NBA history, argues that Julius Erving and Moses Malone were every bit as important to the league's survival as Bird and Magic, maybe more. Erving, the soaring, elegant forward who kept the ABA afloat, had spent years watching championship opportunities slip away. He lost to Walton's Blazers in '77. He lost to Magic's Lakers in '80 and '82. He cried in the visiting locker room at the Forum after that '82 loss, wondering if he'd ever win the title that had eluded him. Then Moses Malone arrived in Philadelphia via trade. Malone, who'd become the first player to jump straight from high school to the pros, who'd bounced from Utah to Portland to Buffalo to Houston before landing with the Sixers, brought something the team had never had, an unstoppable interior force. Together, they stormed to 65 victories. They swept the Lakers in the finals. Moses famously predicted foe, a 4-game sweep of each round, and they nearly delivered. Both things can be true, of course, one analyst wrote. Erving and the ABAers brought talent, style, and panache to a league sorely in need of all three. But in migrating to the two most storied franchises, Bird and Magic gave the NBA sizzle beyond measure. The debate isn't about who was more important, it's about who gets remembered. And in that arena, Doc and Moses have been losing for 40 years. The forgotten foundation is finally getting its due. But what does this have to do with LeBron James? Everything, because the same forces that erased Doc and Moses from the narrative are now being used to diminish LeBron. The final chapter reveals the connection.
Here's what Larry Bird understood when he brought up LeBron James. The same arguments being made about Doc and Moses, that they're footnotes in a story that should center them, are now being made about Bird and Magic themselves. A new generation of fans, raised on advanced analytics and social media debates, looks at the 80s and sees something distant, mythological, less real than the basketball they watch every night. And in that gap between experience and history, something gets lost. Bird sees it happening. He sees the way LeBron's longevity gets reduced to empty stats. He sees the way modern greatness gets measured against a past that grows more perfect with every passing year. LeBron's been carrying this league for 23 years, Bird said. That's not standing on shoulders. That's building your own mountain. He wasn't defending LeBron against Magic. He was defending LeBron against the same forces that erased Doc and Moses. The tendency to flatten history, to make the past simpler than it was, to forget that every generation built on the one before it, while also building something entirely new. Magic understood too. At InvestFest, he made it clear. Each generation adds a floor. Doc and Moses built the first one. Me and Larry built the next. Michael added another. LeBron's been adding for 23 years. The building's still standing. That's what matters. The building's still standing. That's what matters. Not who laid the first brick, not who designed the second floor, just that the building's still standing and that everyone who contributed to it deserves to be remembered. Larry Bird didn't challenge Magic Johnson's legacy. He challenged the way we talk about legacy. He questioned the narratives we accept without examination. He reminded us that history is complicated, that credit is rarely distributed fairly, and that every generation builds on the work of the ones that came before. Magic responded the only way he could, by expanding the conversation, by including Doc and Moses, by including Michael, by including LeBron, by reminding us that basketball isn't a zero-sum game where one person's greatness diminishes another's. The building's still standing, and thanks to Bird and Magic, we're finally talking about everyone who helped build it. Who deserves more credit for saving the NBA? Bird and Magic, or Doc J and Moses? And where does LeBron fit in the conversation? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more stories that go beyond the headlines and into the heart of basketball history.